Aaron.
Yeah.
Why didn't you say it the first time I said Aaron?
Because it's pronounced Aaron.
You done messed up, Aaron.
Aaron here. Thanks for joining me, everyone, for another episode or another segment of SPTV. I think I might have done messed up. I think I might have cut into that clip a little too late. But anyway, you know who else done messed up? The doggone Church of Scientology and David Miscavige done messed up again because they've lost another member. And this has been the tale of Scientology since the late 80s, early 90s, constantly losing members, losing many times more members than they are gaining. And this is someone who was not born and raised in Scientology. I'll share this to the stream here. This is Yoga Premananda. And she got into Scientology in 1996 when she was 23. Let me see. I did write some notes here. 1990. No, she was 21 years old in 1996. She was in Scientology for 14 years. She left in 2011. She has been quietly out for about 12 years, but talks in this video. She talked about in this video that she posted just about 12 hours ago, why it's taken her so long to even discuss it. She discusses why she left Scientology, and her video is 17 minutes long. I have made timestamps, just a few clips that I want to show you and that I want to talk about. Because I think, you know, for every person that you see willing to talk on YouTube, talk publicly about having left Scientology, there's hundreds more who've left and just decided not to talk about it at all. And there's thousands more who are in Scientology wanting to leave, but just can't at this point for one reason or another. And so, yeah, this video has been up for 12 hours. So here, let me show you actually. I'll go full screen. And so this is Yoga Premananda's YouTube channel, 187 subscribers. For 187 subscribers, for this video to have 2,000 views after 15 hours, that's a lot of views for a video with that many subscribers. So this is clearly making the rounds. I feel like I've had hundreds of people message me a link to this video so far this morning. It was probably only a dozen, but it feels like hundreds. Okay, so the first clip that we are going to watch is right here at 29 seconds. So let me, if I can, oh, I'm already full screen there. I'm now full screen. Okay, good. Let's watch.
This has been a video I've been wanting to do for a long time, but out of fear, I've never spoken publicly about my departure from Scientology. I've actually kept it very secret. There's a lot of my friends that I have right now in my life don't even know that I was ever a Scientologist. I kind of just had to forget about it and move on. There's a lot of fear around leaving Scientology because Scientology does a lot of things to try to make people look bad. They try to make them look like criminals. Scientology's gone as far as creating entire websites, slandering really good people, that the only thing that they did was to decide to leave the church and decide to go on their own path of life and their own path of spirituality.
Okay, good. So that's that clip. Bear with me. I'm going through a bunch of different screens here. So, you know, I have heard Mike Rinder specifically comment on the fact that these hate websites that Scientology creates about former members who speak out publicly, that these websites, the intended public of those websites are really more the Scientologists who are still in the bubble. It's not like there's sort of an illusion that those websites are created for the outside world, you know, to discredit the former members. And yes, that's a role that those websites perform. The main role is to send a message to the people inside the bubble that if you leave, you better just leave quietly. If you leave, you better just keep your mouth shut and get on with your life and not say anything. Because if you're thinking of talking to the media or you're thinking of creating a YouTube channel or anything like that, we're going to create a hate website about you. And so I think it's interesting that she mentioned that. Okay, so the next clip I want to share with you starts at 3:32. Okay, here we go.
One of the things about the organization is how controlling it is. This is the predominant thing that I did not like about Scientology the entire time that I was in there. It's very controlling. They kind of get into every aspect of your life. It's very unhealthy. It's a very unhealthy relationship between, the participants, which was me, and then the organization. There was them telling me what to do, where to go, when to go there, how long to stay there, who to talk to, who not to talk to, what to read, what to watch. Everything is very micromanaged. So this really unhealthy aspect of Scientology became a serious problem in my life. And so that was one of the main reasons why I left. This also, the thing that attracted me to Scientology in the beginning, when I was 23 years old, the first time that somebody told me about it and they took me in there and I took a course, was that Scientology claims to be all about creating a planet that has no war, no drugs, and is a sane planet. They claim that Scientology and all of the organizations and groups that are affiliated with Scientology are to make this a sane planet. And that is absolutely not true. Scientology claims to be a certain way, but then they're absolutely not that way. They say that they want this thing, they paint this great picture, but then their actual behavior is the opposite of that picture. All these discrepancies, I would go in and I would say, but what about this? And what about that? And why do you preach this? But then we have that thing over there. And, every time I would try to communicate with them, it would always be like, oh, it's my problem. Something's wrong with me, or I have to go do X, Y, and Z now because I'm not seeing it clearly, or there's some issue with me. It was always put back on the person. So anybody that's in that organization, I'm sure, has tried to raise a flag with them, and they always get it thrown back in their face. I always got everything that I tried to communicate openly with them about thrown back on me. And after a while, that becomes daunting.
Okay, good. So this is really interesting. I think every single person who has ever left Scientology will tell you that it was after at least trying to do something about the things they were running into or encountering, the things that felt unjust or seemed off policy or off source or a misapplication of this or that. And this kind of speaks to the fact of, Scientology will always say that any of these horrible stories that you hear from former members, it was from bad Scientologists behaving badly. It was from a misapplication of ethics, tech, or policy. It was from an injustice. And the fact is, the reason it is impossible to fix or to get resolution on any issues that Scientologists raise inside the bubble to the proper authorities is for precisely the reason that these things are in accordance with policy or are in accordance with command intention or David Miscavige's orders. Because if people were allowed to bring resolution to the issues that were raised, they would. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like good Scientologists behaving properly are still completely unable to resolve the complaints that are raised by people inside the bubble regarding various mistreatments, crimes, things like this, because this mistreatment is in accordance with LRH policy, in accordance with David Miscavige's orders, in accordance with command intention. Okay, so that was a great point that I was glad that she raised. Okay, the next clip is at 10:06. She makes reference to the number of under the radar Scientologists that there are. Let's take a look at this.
And bigger once they get out. I know a lot of people that have one foot in and one foot out. There's so many people that I know that don't want to be in there anymore, but they're afraid to go through what I went through. They're afraid to go through what other people also go through when they get out of that organization. And so they just keep it on the down low. They just keep it quiet. They pretend that they're still Scientologists, but really on the outside world, they don't care about Scientology. They just don't want the mess. A lot of people that are Scientology thinks are Scientologists, they really aren't. For me,
okay, that was that clip. Let me see here. The next clip that I want to show you. Yes. Oh my goodness. She tells why it is that in her 14 years in Scientology, she never joined staff. And you got to hear this. This is at 11:17. Here we go.
Never worked for the church. I contemplated working for them so many times, and thank God I never did. The reason why I never wound up becoming a staff member and working for the church was because one of my friends that I worked with at this Scientology company that I worked at, she was a staff member. She didn't do anything wrong, and she had somebody take her and stick her in the Scientology jail, the Scientology jail for 5 years. She was basically imprisoned in the Scientology jail for 5 years. She didn't do anything wrong. She was forced labor. She was forced, all these different things were forced on her spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically. And when she came out of that Scientology jail, she finally came off of staff and became public, but she never left the church. Believe it or not, she's still brainwashed and in there with her husband. Her whole family, was working in the church as well. She didn't want to lose her family, but I saw how much PTSD she had from this experience. So meeting people like that in the church, thank God it gave me the awareness to never sign a contract, to never become a staff member, to never actually work there. Thank goodness. It would have been a whole even worse experience if I had worked there. So I'm grateful for that.
Okay, super interesting. She's clearly talking about a second generation Scientologist who ended up joining the Sea Organization and was assigned to the Sea Org's RPF, the Rehabilitation Project Force, which is without exaggeration, Scientology prison. There's no similar thing for public Scientologists. There's not even a similar thing for regular Scientology staff members. It's dedicated for Scientology Sea Org members, the ones who pledge to work for Scientology for the next billion years, the ones whose motto is "We come back." That's a reference to the picking up a new body next lifetime and coming back and continuing to work for the Sea Organization. And this is also why the Sea Org's RPF has been canceled. Not because anybody woke up and decided this is a horrible way to treat people, but because the RPF has been just a nonstop source of bad PR, bad press, and legal problems for Scientology. Now, it took them 45 years to realize we should probably not do this anymore. We're creating more problems for ourselves than we're fixing. But now I'm really dying to know. I've kind of been operating on the assumption that Yoga was a public Scientologist in New York, but I'm not sure about that. It was either New York or LA, from what I can tell. And now I'm dying to know who her friend is. I'm dying to know who that family is. And by the way, Yoga, since everyone sent me your video today, I'm sure everyone will be sending you my video. I'd love to interview on the channel, have a more in-depth conversation with you about your time in Scientology. And all sorts of good stuff. Okay, so let's see. The next clip is at 1449. Let's find it. Okay, here we go.
And so this is my final coming out. This is my final celebration for me of being able to speak publicly about my experience with Scientology. This is me getting back this final piece of my sovereign voice, my sovereignty. My legs are like vibrating right now as I'm claiming this and saying it. And so it feels so good for me to just talk publicly out about my experience. I would definitely want to warn people about Scientology. That's for sure. I feel like there is a lot of stuff out there now in the public, because the more that hundreds and hundreds of us can't all have the same story for no reason, there's so many of us that tell the same story of these things that we've all encountered within that organization. Since the organization has not had the good merit to change, which they should have a long time ago, I feel that if Scientology would have changed and actually fixed all of these issues, probably a lot of people would have stayed in there. But the fact that they have not changed, they have not fixed it, they haven't issued any apologies, they do not take responsibility for what they do. It's very much a one-sided road with them. And I think that's why the organization is falling apart. And I think that's why Leah Remini created the TV series, and that's why so many of Scientology's top echelon of executives are all out of the church and speaking heavily against the church. This happens when something is no longer needed in the ecosystem of the planet. When something is no longer needed in the ecosystem of the planet, it kills itself. It takes itself out.
So some really interesting points that were made here, and that's the last clip. So we'll just go full screen now. Really interesting thoughts here. Well, let me jump to this one. So she refers to the fact that Scientology is essentially taking itself out. And this is why so many people are leaving. This is why essentially the entire executive structure of Scientology has left not just the Sea Org, but left Scientology. If you're a public Scientologist and you're still in the bubble, you really do, I suggest that you consider this for a moment. Because when you consider what it is that Scientology claims to offer, eternal spiritual freedom, freedom from amnesia on the whole track, freedom from the cycle of birth to death, freedom from the physical universe, essentially your eternity, your immortality. When you compared to that, there is no amount of abuse or mistreatment or anything like that that would, theoretically speaking, there's no amount of abuse or mistreatment that would cause someone to sacrifice something so priceless. And yet you see OT8s leaving Scientology. You see people who worked with L. Ron Hubbard leaving Scientology. You see people who've been in international management for decades leaving Scientology. What you might want to consider is, do these guys know something that I don't know? Because clearly these people have done the cost-benefit analysis and they've concluded, I'm not willing to put up with this for that. If anyone at the upper levels of the bridge had attained the ability to go fully and stably exterior at will, they wouldn't leave Scientology. They'd say, oh, you've already got 3 of my kids. Would you like 3 more? Me and my wife are going to have more kids just so that we can give you more kids to work for free. Like, if Scientology had ever even once delivered on any of these crazy promises that it promises, you wouldn't have people at the highest echelons of the organization leaving. So I thought that was interesting that she mentioned that. On the subject of because Scientology has refused to change, this started an interesting train of thought, an internal monologue I was having with myself, which is when you talk about the organization refusing to change, that can only refer to things like the abusive practices. And it is interesting to consider people leaving Scientology because of the abusive practices, but not, and maybe even implying that if the organization had changed those practices, it would be an organization worth staying in. And I know that is a mental place that people arrive at on their way out of Scientology. I feel like I've sort of taken maybe one extra step, which is Scientology is a scam, though. Like, it is a lie. It's a con. It's a fraud. Not everybody in the organization realizes that's what it is. Not even all the people at the highest levels of the organization have fully come to terms with the fact that that's what it is. It's certainly not true that everyone in the organization is just scamming everybody. But once you get enough distance from the organization, you have the freedom to think about it, the freedom to look at it for what it really is. You sort of go, oh, wow, it really is just a scam. And David Miscavige knows there's no upper OT levels. Anyone in Scientology knows there's no such thing as the state of clear. I think most people are still under the delusion that there is such a thing as full OT, but they don't know how L. Ron Hubbard really died. They don't know that there's no OT 9 and 10. They don't know that L. Ron Hubbard tried to get his assistant to make him a high voltage e-meter that would shock him, blow off his body thetans, and allow him to drop his body without any BTs. For those of you more familiar with the Scientology, cosmology or whatever the right word would be, failing to getting rid of your BTs is something you're supposed to have fully accomplished on OT7. So up until LRH's death, he was basically still stuck at the level of OT7. And before his death, he did say, I have failed. Now, there's no Scientologist in the world that's going to believe the story that I just told, but that's because they're not allowed to believe it. They're not free to believe it. They're not even in a mental space of being able to believe it. And it might seem like I'm sort of, going on a tangent here, but she does, she makes a fair and accurate and honest point, which is the organization has refused to change, and that's true. I just sort of wanted to say out loud that even if they had refused to even if they changed, Scientology would still be a fraud. Scientology would still be a con. And I know I can hear voices already going, but the Scientology lower levels helped me. And that's fine. Scientology doesn't claim to be something that just helps people at the lower levels. Scientology will never be something that just helps people at the lower levels. It's against L. Ron Hubbard policy to sell Scientology as something that just helps people at the lower levels. It's a tech downgrades. It's a tech degrade and a tech downgrade. And so it is not possible for the organization to become something that isn't a fraud, isn't a scam, isn't promising the sun, moon, and stars while knowing that it's just selling coal. And so this isn't even a rant against what Yoga said. It's just sort of, like I said, an internal monologue I was having with myself that I've now expressed out loud. And so it does make me wonder, like, and this would be something I'd be really interested in speaking with Yoga about in an interview, is at what point in her route out of Scientology, because she mentioned the last 3 years of her 14 years in Scientology were particularly difficult, where she was trying to trying to reconcile all the contradictions, all the hypocrisy and everything. And I wonder at what point in her route out of Scientology did she start to question not just the behavior of the organization, not just the behavior of the people in ethics and, management, but start to question the belief system itself, start to question the reality of clear, the reality of OT, the upper OT levels, start to question the reality of L. Ron Hubbard. That's a conversation that I think would be really interesting to have. So go ahead and check out Yoga's YouTube channel. I'll show it here once again. Let me bring it up. Yoga I want to make sure I'm saying it right. Premananda. And yep. And the name of her YouTube channel is her name. Guys, it's going to be a jam-packed day today. I've got like 3 or 4 more videos I'm planning to do, and they've got to all be done in the next 3 hours. So if you want yourself some of that, stay tuned because there's a lot more coming. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe